She could feel their eyes on her back as Colonel Blackwell waited for her answer. Could this underestimated specialist turn the tables? Specialist Talia Novakovich saw the flaws in the mission plan immediately: contradicting intel, mismatched timestamps, impossible extraction points, but the complexity froze her voice. The room filled with smirks and whispers. As I thought, the colonel dismissed her, moving on to someone who belonged in this elite unit. Little did they know, her silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about underestimated people who prove everyone wrong, consider subscribing for more content that celebrates quiet brilliance. The room smelled of old coffee and tactical board markers. Specialist Talia Novakovich sat among the other members of Special Operations Planning Unit 7, her posture rigid against the uncomfortable metal chair. Unlike her colleagues, mostly men with decades of combat experience, her expertise was theoretical. Advanced strategic planning from the Pentagon's Analytical Division. Through the reinforced windows, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the planning room, highlighting dust particles dancing in the air. Talia observed her teammates quietly, noting how they clustered around Major Riker. Their easy camaraderie built on shared battlefield stories and mutual respect. Stories she could not share, experiences she did not have. Colonel Draymond Blackwell entered the room with the force of a storm front. His presence immediately commanding attention. A decorated veteran with more scars than patience, he carried a thick folder stamped with classification markers. His eyes hard as flints scanned the assembled specialists before landing on Talia. "Specialist Novakovich," he said, voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "The Pentagon thought we needed an analyst. Show us why." Talia rose to her feet, feeling the weight of every gaze. She had prepared for this, had studied the preliminary briefing materials for hours. But the colonel's tone carried an unmistakable challenge, one that made clear her position here was viewed as a headquarters imposition rather than a tactical asset. "Sir," she responded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have reviewed the initial parameters of the training exercise." The colonel gestured toward the tactical board. "Then enlighten us about how you would handle the hostage extraction simulation. Urban environment, hostile territory, unknown number of tangos, and limited intelligence." He turned to the rest of the team. "Let's see what the Pentagon's finest has to offer." Talia approached the board, acutely aware of the skeptical eyes following her. She took the offered marker, uncapped it, and then paused. The satellite imagery displayed on the screen to her right didn't match the drone footage timestamp on the left. The guard rotation patterns contradicted the intelligence summary. The reported weapons cache locations created impossible blind spots in the extraction route. Her mind raced, processing the discrepancies, calculating probabilities, running scenarios. Something was wrong with the intelligence itself, not just the preliminary approach. She could see multiple potential catastrophes unfolding simultaneously. And in that critical moment, overwhelmed by the cascade of contradictions that nobody else had questioned, she froze. Seconds ticked by. 8 excruciating seconds of silence. "As I thought," Colonel Blackwell finally said, his voice a dismissive blade cutting through the tension. Smirks rippled across the room. Talia caught the whispered analyst from Major Riker beside her, the word dripping with contempt. She returned to her seat, cheeks burning with humiliation as Colonel Blackwell continued the exercise, pointedly asking everyone but her for input. "Riker, entry point assessment. South wall offers minimal exposure, sir. 10 seconds from breach to first contact. Layton, hostage positioning based on thermal signatures. Northwest corner of the second floor, sir. Dalton extraction route." Each specialist offered confident, decisive responses. Talia sat silently cataloging the flaws in the evolving strategy, noting how the colonel incorporated each suggestion without questioning the underlying intelligence discrepancies. They were building an entire operation on contradictory data, and no one seemed to notice or care. When the session ended 2 hours later, Talia gathered her notes and rose to leave. Major Riker brushed past her, deliberately bumping her shoulder. "If you can't handle a simple planning exercise," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear, What good are you going to be when it's real? She watched him join the others heading to the mess hall, their laughter echoing in the corridor. Turning back to the now empty room, she approached the tactical board again. Alone, she began meticulously documenting each intelligence contradiction, each tactical vulnerability. The following morning, Talia arrived at the operations center earlier than required. She had spent half the night analyzing the intelligence package, confirming her suspicions. The contradictions weren't random errors. They reflected a pattern, one that suggested the simulation was testing more than just extraction capabilities. Will her late-night work change the unit's fate? Burning midnight oil specialist. The voice startled her. Lieutenant Colonel Farron stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, eyebrows raised at the sight of Talia's extensive notes. Sir, she acknowledged, straightening, I was reviewing the exercise parameters. He approached her desk, scanning her meticulous diagrams. Interesting approach. Most specialists focus on the tactical elements rather than intelligence verification. The intelligence has contradictions, sir, she ventured cautiously. Significant ones that would affect operational viability. He studied her for a moment. Have you brought this to Colonel Blackwell's attention? The memory of the previous day's humiliation flashed through her mind. I will present my findings at the appropriate time, sir. See that you do, he said, nodding slightly before departing. Analysis is only valuable when shared. Specialist. The morning briefing began at 0800 hours sharp. Colonel Blackwell stood at the front of the room reviewing the progress of the extraction plan. Talia noted that not a single intelligence contradiction had been addressed overnight. If anything, the plan now incorporated even more problematic assumptions. We'll conduct the full operational rehearsal tomorrow, the colonel announced. Today, we finalize all approach vectors, timing sequences, and contingencies. Riker will lead the primary team. Dalton, you have Overwatch. Layton, communications and support. He didn't assign Talia any role. The omission was deliberate, a clear message about her perceived value to the unit. She kept her expression neutral, focusing on her notes rather than the sidelong glances from her teammates. The day progressed with detailed planning sessions. Each specialist contributed to their assigned areas, refining the operational timeline. Talia was relegated to administrative duties, documenting decisions rather than influencing them. By late afternoon, the plan had taken full shape, a plan she knew was fundamentally flawed. As the final briefing wrapped up, Colonel Blackwell surveyed the room with satisfaction. Questions or concerns before we lock this down? Talia felt her pulse quicken. This was her moment, perhaps her only opportunity to prevent a disastrous training exercise that could permanently damage her career and potentially endanger her teammates. Even in simulation, the flaws in the plan would result in catastrophic failure. She raised her hand, the colonel's eyebrows lifted slightly, surprise briefly replacing his usual stern expression. Specialist Novakovich, found your voice. Several specialists chuckled. Major Riker rolled his eyes visibly. Sir, I have concerns about the operational timeline as currently structured, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Do tell, the colonel replied, his tone making clear he expected little of value. Permission to approach the tactical board, sir. A tense silence followed. The colonel finally gestured with exaggerated courtesy. By all means, specialist, enlighten us with your theoretical expertise. Talia rose from her seat, gathering her detailed notes. She could feel the weight of skepticism as she walked to the front of the room. Major Riker leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The rest of the unit watched with expressions ranging from indifference to mild curiosity to outright dismissal. Standing before the tactical board, Talia took a deep breath. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. Her credibility, her place in the unit, possibly her entire career trajectory. She had spent years training for this role, developing her analytical skills, learning to see patterns others missed. Now she needed to make them see what she saw. She uncapped a marker, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The tactical board displayed the current operational plan in detailed phases. infiltration, breach, hostage location, extraction, and exfiltration. Each element meticulously planned by experienced operators who had conducted similar missions in real-world environments. And each element built on fundamentally flawed intelligence. The operation as currently planned will fail, she began, her voice clear and direct. And I can demonstrate exactly why. The smirks around the room hardened into frowns. Colonel Blackwell's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. The first critical issue is the infiltration timing, Talia continued, circling the timestamp on the board. The satellite imagery we're basing our approach on is marked as current as of 0600 yesterday. However, the drone footage timestamp indicates collection from 3 days prior. She placed her first set of notes on the table, spreading out side-by-side comparison images. These cannot both be accurate representations of current conditions. Either the satellite data is mislabeled or the drone footage is outdated. Given the discrepancies in structural elements here, and here, she pointed to specific locations. I believe the drone footage accurately shows new construction that creates a significant blind spot in our planned approach. Colonel Blackwell stepped closer, examining the images with narrowed eyes. Furthermore, Talia continued, moving to the next phase of the operation. The reported guard rotation patterns in the intelligence summary directly contradict the pattern visible in the thermal imaging sequences. She displayed her time-lapse analysis showing the discrepancy. If we breach at the planned time, we'll encounter double the expected resistance. One by one, she methodically identified each contradiction, each flawed assumption, each potential point of failure. The room had fallen completely silent except for her voice growing stronger with each revelation. She wasn't just finding minor issues. She was demonstrating fundamental problems with the entire operational concept. When she reached the extraction route, she overlaid the reported weapons cache locations with the planned exfiltration path. This route takes us directly through what appears to be an unreported enemy position. It appears in only one of 7 intelligence reports. The one report that was dismissed as less reliable. For nearly 15 minutes, she had commanded the room's complete attention. As she placed her marker down, the silence felt heavy, oppressive. Major Riker's smirk had long since vanished, replaced by a thoughtful frown. Lieutenant Colonel Farron, who had entered silently during her presentation, stood at the back of the room with an unreadable expression. Colonel Blackwell approached the board slowly, examining each of her annotations in turn. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for his response. Would it be dismissal, anger, acknowledgement? After what felt like an eternity, he turned to face the room. Specialist Novakovich, he began, his voice level. You identified 16 separate intelligence contradictions that no one else caught. He turned back to the board, studying her corrections. 16 points of failure that would have compromised the entire operation. The room remained silent as Colonel Blackwell studied the board. After a long moment, he turned to face the unit. Specialist Novakovich, he said, his voice measured and thoughtful. I asked you yesterday to demonstrate why the Pentagon thought we needed an analyst. I believe you've just done exactly that. A murmur rippled through the room. Talia stood perfectly still, marker still in hand, uncertain of what would follow. You didn't freeze during yesterday's exercise, did you? The colonel continued, his gaze direct and searching. You were processing these contradictions even then. Talia straightened her shoulders. Yes, sir. The discrepancies were immediately apparent, but I needed time to verify the pattern and determine their tactical implications. When asked to proceed without that analysis, I hesitated. The colonel nodded slowly. A moment of hesitation that would have saved lives in the field. He turned to address the entire unit. This is why intelligence verification matters. This is why we don't simply accept what we're given without question. He gestured toward Talia's annotations. Specialist Novakovich has identified critical flaws that would have compromised this operation at multiple points. We will rebuild the plan, incorporating these corrections. Major Riker shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sir, with all due respect, we've run similar operations dozens of times. The basic approach is sound. Is it? Colonel Blackwell challenged, pointing to one of Talia's annotations. Would you consider an extraction route that runs directly through an enemy position sound, Major? No, sir, Riker admitted. But that position isn't marked on our primary intelligence. Exactly my point, the colonel replied. We missed it, all of us, except Specialist Novakovich. He turned back to Talia. I want a complete reassessment of the intelligence package. Work with Lieutenant Colonel Farron. We'll reconvene at 1600 hours to review your recommendations. As the room cleared, Talia gathered her notes, still processing what had just happened. The shift from dismissal to validation had come so suddenly that she felt slightly disoriented. Lieutenant Colonel Farron approached, nodding approvingly. Well done, Specialist, he said quietly. Though I suspect you've just created a lot more work for yourself. She smiled slightly. Better than watching a flawed operation fail, sir. For the next several hours, Talia worked with Lieutenant Colonel Farron to completely reassess the intelligence package. They cross-referenced satellite imagery with ground reports, verified timestamps, and reconciled contradictory information. With each correction, the true operational picture became clearer, revealing a much more complex scenario than initially presented. By mid-afternoon, they had rebuilt the intelligence foundation completely. Talia's analytical methods had proven remarkably effective at identifying not just the contradictions, but the likely accurate information hidden within the conflicting reports. At 1600 hours, the unit reconvened. The tactical board had been cleared, ready for the revised operational plan. Colonel Blackwell nodded to Talia. Specialist, present your findings. With newfound confidence, Talia walked through the completely reassessed intelligence picture. She explained how the contradictions had been resolved, which sources proved reliable, and which had been compromised or outdated. Using this verified intelligence, she outlined the recommended changes to the operational approach. The primary infiltration route should shift 200 m east, she explained, marking the new entry point. This avoids the recently constructed guard post visible in the satellite imagery, but absent from the drone footage. The breach timing needs to be adjusted to account for the actual guard rotation schedule, which follows a 30-minute pattern rather than the reported 20-minute intervals. She continued methodically through each phase of the operation, providing clear, logical alternatives based on the verified intelligence. When she reached the extraction route, she highlighted the critical discovery that had initially caused her to freeze. This unreported enemy position here, she indicated a building near the original extraction route, appears in only one intelligence report, but is corroborated by thermal signature anomalies in this sector. The revised extraction route avoids this area completely while still maintaining rapid access to the designated landing zone. As she completed her presentation, Talia realized the room had a completely different energy than the day before. The specialists were engaged, asking relevant questions, suggesting tactical refinements that worked with her intelligence assessment rather than ignoring it. Even Major Riker had shifted his approach. The new breach timing creates a 5-second vulnerability at this junction, he noted, pointing to a corridor intersection. We'll need additional cover fire from Dalton's position to compensate. Agreed, Talia responded, incorporating his suggestion into the plan. That maintains our tactical advantage while addressing the intelligence reality. By the session's end, they had created an entirely new operational plan built on verified intelligence and enhanced by the unit's tactical expertise. Colonel Blackwell reviewed the final version with careful attention to detail. This is what integration of intelligence and operations should look like, he finally declared. We'll run the full simulation tomorrow using this revised plan. Specialist Novakovich, you'll observe from the command center with me. I want your real-time assessment of intelligence factors as the operation unfolds. As the team dispersed, Major Riker approached Talia. The dismissive smirk was gone, replaced by a thoughtful assessing look. That was solid work, he admitted. Analytical perspective has its place, it seems. So does tactical experience, she replied evenly. The plan works because it incorporates both. He nodded slowly. Tomorrow will tell. With that, he departed, leaving Talia to gather her materials. Lieutenant Colonel Farron appeared at her side. You've made quite an impression, Specialist. I just did my job, sir. Your job is to prevent failures before they happen, he responded. That's exactly what you did today. Don't undervalue that contribution. The following morning arrived with heightened tension. The full operational simulation would be conducted with complete tactical equipment, simulated opponents, and performance evaluation by senior officers, including General Harrington from Central Command. Talia reported to the command center as instructed, finding Colonel Blackwell already reviewing the final preparations. Specialist, he acknowledged her arrival. You'll monitor intelligence factors from this station. Any discrepancies between expected conditions and actual observations? Flag them immediately. Yes, sir. As the operation commenced, Talia watched the tactical displays with intense focus. The unit moved according to the revised plan, encountering each obstacle exactly where the verified intelligence had predicted. The infiltration proceeded smoothly with none of the exposure risks the original plan would have created. Phase 1 complete, reported the communication specialist. Proceeding to breach point Alpha. Colonel Blackwell glanced at Talia. Assessment. Intelligence factors align with expectations, sir. Thermal signatures confirm guard positions as predicted. No anomalies detected. The operation continued through each phase. The breach executed at the revised timing encountered exactly the resistance level Talia had predicted. The team moved efficiently through the target building, located the simulated hostages, and began the extraction process. As they approached the extraction phase, Talia noticed a small anomaly on one of the sensor feeds. Sir, movement detected 300 m south of extraction point not identified in the intelligence package. Colonel Blackwell immediately relayed the information to the field team. Riker, possible unknown factors south of your position. Adjust route accordingly. Acknowledged came Major Riker's response, shifting to contingency route Bravo. The team smoothly transitioned to the alternate extraction path Talia had included in the plan, avoiding the potential threat entirely. Within minutes, they reached the extraction point and completed the mission successfully. When the simulation ended, the command center erupted in satisfied nods and murmured approval. General Harrington, who had observed silently from the back of the room, approached Colonel Blackwell. Impressive execution, Colonel. Flawless intelligence integration. Who was responsible for the intelligence verification? Colonel Blackwell gestured toward Talia. Specialist Novakovich, sir. She identified critical contradictions in the original intelligence package and developed the revised assessment. The general's eyebrows rose slightly. Specialist, that was exceptional work. Your real-time adaptation to the unidentified movement in the south sector potentially saved this operation. Thank you, sir, Talia responded, maintaining her professional composure despite the surge of validation she felt. I'll want a full report on your analytical methodology, the general continued. Central Command could benefit from implementing similar verification protocols. Of course, sir. After the general departed, Colonel Blackwell turned to Talia with a rare expression of approval. Well done, Specialist. Your contribution was critical to this success. The unit returned from the field, exhilarated by their performance. As they filed into the command center for debriefing, Major Riker caught Talia's eye and offered a respectful nod. That unknown factor you spotted, he said, would have walked right into our original extraction path. Good catch. Just doing my job, she replied. Your job saved our assessment scores, Layton added, joining them. And in real life, it would have saved our lives. Colonel Blackwell called the debriefing to order. Outstanding execution today. The integration of verified intelligence with tactical expertise resulted in optimal mission performance. He looked directly at Talia. Specialist Novakovich's analytical methodology will be incorporated into our standard operating procedures going forward. The acknowledgement sent a ripple of surprise murmurs through the unit. Incorporating a new procedure into SOPs was rare, especially from a training exercise. Intelligence and operations must work as seamlessly as your team did today, the colonel continued. That means respecting what each brings to the mission. Analytical insight is as valuable as tactical experience when lives are on the line. After the debriefing concluded, Talia remained at her station, completing her assessment report. The command center gradually emptied as the specialists departed for well-deserved rest. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice Major Riker's return until he spoke. "Novakovich," he said, his tone markedly different from their previous interactions. "The team is gathering in the rec room. Your presence is requested." She looked up surprised. "My presence?" "You're part of this unit," he replied simply. "And today you proved why that matters." Will her newfound respect transform the team? The invitation represented more than just a social gathering. It was acceptance, acknowledgement of her place within the team. She saved her report and nodded. "I'll be there shortly." As Major Riker turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. Analytical isn't a weakness. It's just a different kind of strength." "Different strengths make a stronger team," she replied. "Exactly." He offered a genuine smile. "Don't make us wait too long, specialist. Even analysts deserve to celebrate." In the days that followed the successful simulation, Talia found herself in an entirely different position within Special Operations Planning Unit 7. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. During briefings, specialists would glance her way when intelligence discrepancies arose. In planning sessions, her input was actively sought rather than reluctantly tolerated. Colonel Blackwell had instituted a new protocol requiring cross-verification of all intelligence packages before operational planning began. A process that formalized what Talia had done instinctively. She had been assigned to develop training materials explaining her analytical methodology for implementation across other units. 3 weeks after the simulation, Talia sat in the analysis lab reviewing satellite imagery for an upcoming training exercise. The door opened and Lieutenant Colonel Farron entered. "Making progress, specialist?" he asked, examining her meticulously organized workstation. "Yes, sir. I've identified several areas requiring verification in the new intelligence package." He nodded approvingly. "Your methodology is making waves, Novakovich." General Harrington was impressed enough to mention it to Central Command. "They're considering implementing your cross-verification protocols as standard procedure." Talia looked up, surprised. "That's unexpected, sir." "Is it?" Farron leaned against the doorframe. "You prevented a catastrophic failure by seeing what everyone else missed. That's exactly the kind of innovation that saves lives in the field." Before she could respond, her tablet chimed with an incoming message. "Excuse me, sir," she said, checking the notification. "Colonel Blackwell has requested my presence." "Best not keep him waiting," Farron replied with a knowing smile that Talia couldn't quite interpret. She made her way to the colonel's office, wondering what new assignment awaited. In recent weeks, her workload had increased substantially as more units requested intelligence verification using her methodology. It was validating but exhausting. The colonel's office door stood open. He looked up from his computer as she arrived, gesturing for her to enter. "Specialist Novakovich," he greeted her. "Take a seat," she sat, noting the unusual formality in his tone. "I've been reviewing your performance since joining this unit," he began, hands folded on his desk. "Initially, I had reservations about integrating a pure analyst into an operational planning team." Talia maintained her professional composure, though his words brought back the sting of those early days when her contributions had been so readily dismissed. "Those reservations were misplaced," the colonel continued, surprising her. "Your analytical approach has proven invaluable to this unit's effectiveness. The methodology you demonstrated during the simulation has applications well beyond our specific operational context." "Thank you, sir." Colonel Blackwell opened a drawer and removed a small box. "This arrived today from Central Command with specific instructions that I deliver it personally." He placed the box on the desk and slid it toward her. Talia hesitated briefly before picking it up. "Go ahead," he encouraged. She opened the box carefully. Inside lay a tactical planning pin, its polished surface catching the light. These pins were traditionally awarded only to field officers who had demonstrated exceptional tactical planning capabilities in active operations. For an analyst to receive one was unprecedented. "This comes with a message from General Harrington," the colonel said, handing her a folded note. Talia unfolded it and read. "Sometimes the most crucial moments in battle aren't when we act, but when we pause to truly see what others miss. Your freeze saved lives. Wear this with the pride you've earned. General David Harrington." She looked up momentarily at a loss for words. "The general doesn't issue commendations lightly," Colonel Blackwell remarked. "He recognizes, as I've come to, that analytical insight is as critical to mission success as tactical execution." "I appreciate the recognition, sir," Talia finally managed. "But I was just doing my job." "That's precisely the point, specialist. You did your job exceptionally well, when it would have been easier to simply go along with the prevailing opinion. That takes a different kind of courage than what we typically recognize in this unit." He stood and came around the desk. "May I?" Understanding his intent, Talia arose and stood at attention. Colonel Blackwell took the pin from the box and affixed it to her uniform with ceremonial precision. "Wear it with pride, Specialist Novakovich. You've earned it." "Thank you, sir." As she left the colonel's office, pin gleaming on her uniform, Talia felt a complex mix of emotions. Validation certainly, but also a sense of responsibility. This recognition wasn't just about her individual performance. It represented a shift in how analytical contributions were valued within operational contexts. The common area was unusually crowded when she entered. Major Riker, Layton, Dalton, and several other specialists were gathered, apparently engaged in casual conversation that ceased abruptly when she appeared. Their eyes immediately went to the pin on her uniform. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Major Riker stepped forward. "Tactical planning pin," he observed, studying it with professional interest. "First analyst in unit history to receive one, I believe." "Yes," she replied simply, unsure where this was heading. To her surprise, Riker extended his hand. "Congratulations, Specialist." "Well deserved." One by one, the other specialists approached, offering congratulations and respectful acknowledgments. There was no mockery, no resentment, only professional recognition of achievement. Layton, always the most outspoken, grinned broadly. "Does this mean we have to listen to your analysis from now on?" "You should have been listening all along," Dalton retorted good-naturedly. "Would have saved us a lot of trouble." Talia found herself smiling. "Intelligence and operations working together, that's how we succeed." "Speaking of which," Riker interjected, "we've been assigned a complex scenario for next week's exercise. Mountain terrain, limited communications, multiple objectives. We could use your analytical perspective during the preliminary planning session." The invitation represented more than just a professional courtesy. It was an acknowledgement that her skills were not just tolerated, but valued, sought after by the very specialists who had once dismissed them. "I'll be there," she assured him. Later that evening, Talia sat alone in the analysis lab, completing her verification of the latest intelligence package. The facility had grown quiet as most personnel had departed for the day. She found herself reflecting on the journey from that moment of hesitation, that freeze that had nearly defined her in the unit's eyes, to the recognition she'd received today. The door opened and Specialist Dalton appeared. "Still at it, Novakovich. Some of us are heading into town for dinner. You should join us." "I need to finish this verification first," she replied. "But I might catch up." "Working too hard," he commented, but his tone was respectful. "That pin doesn't mean you have to verify every piece of intelligence single-handedly, you know." She smiled slightly. Old habits. After Dalton left, Talia returned to her work with renewed focus. The intelligence package for the mountain terrain exercise contained subtle inconsistencies that required careful analysis. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Lieutenant Colonel Farron's arrival until he spoke. "The pin suits you," he observed from the doorway. Talia looked up. Thank you, sir. I knew you'd earn it eventually, he continued, entering the lab. From the moment you joined this unit, I saw the potential in your analytical approach. Even when I froze during that first exercise, especially then, Farron replied. A lesser analyst would have pushed forward with incomplete verification, risking the mission rather than their pride. You chose accuracy over appearances. That's exactly what we need more of. He examined her current work with professional interest. The mountain terrain scenario, complex intelligence picture. Yes, sir. Multiple inconsistencies in the surveillance data. I'm cross-referencing with historical patterns to determine the most likely accurate information. Good. But don't miss dinner with your team, he advised. The connections you're building are as important as the analysis you provide. After he departed, Talia completed her verification and saved her findings. As she prepared to leave, she caught her reflection in the darkened computer screen, the tactical planning pin visible on her uniform. The symbol represented not just recognition, but responsibility. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable contribution came not from immediate action, but from the courage to pause and truly see what others missed. When she entered the facility's main hallway, she was surprised to find Major Riker waiting near the exit. Thought you might still be working, he said. The team's waiting, cars outside when you're ready. You didn't need to wait, she replied, touched by the gesture. Yes, we did, he countered simply. You're part of this unit, Novakovich. We don't leave anyone behind. As they walked together toward the exit, Riker glanced at her pin. You know, when you froze during that first exercise, I thought it confirmed everything I believed about analysts in the field. And now I understand that what looked like hesitation was actually the most valuable kind of caution. He held the door for her. In our line of work, recognizing what you don't know before you act can be the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Outside, the rest of the team waited by the vehicles. They greeted Talia with easy camaraderie. No longer the outsider, but a valued specialist whose unique perspective had earned their respect. As she joined them, Talia realized that the true measure of her achievement wasn't the pin on her uniform, but this acceptance, this recognition that different kinds of courage and different forms of contribution all had their place in the complex world of operational planning. The tactical planning pin caught the fading sunlight as she climbed into the vehicle, a tangible reminder that sometimes the most crucial moments weren't when we act, but when we pause to truly see what others miss. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories so you don't miss the subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where quiet strength is celebrated, and every hero story finds a voice.